There is a moment, quiet, procedural, and often overlooked, when a student or young professional first encounters what power actually looks like. It's not in a lecture hall, or a civics course, or a headline about the Supreme Court. Instead, it's in an email from a university office, a notice from a licensing board, or maybe a complaint filed within a professional organization. It's the moment when an accusation is no longer just abstract, and the system that responds to it isn't the constitutional one you were taught about, but something else. Something internal, administrative, and insulated. We're told these systems exist to ensure fairness. But in reality, they exist because the constitutional system has been bypassed. Let's start with the most basic promise of due process, that you'll be told what you're accused of, and given a real opportunity to respond before anything is taken from you. In a constitutional court, that promise isn't optional. You're formally charged. You're given the rule you allegedly violated. You're shown the evidence. You're allowed time and counsel to prepare a defense. The purpose is protection. The mechanism is structured procedure. The application is public and reviewable. Now consider the version many students actually encounter. A notice arrives describing a violation of a broadly worded policy, harassment, misconduct, professionalism, bias, often defined expansively enough to cover a wide range of behavior. The details might be limited. The evidence might not yet be fully disclosed. You're told to meet with an investigator. You may or may not be allowed meaningful representation. The process just proceeds under institutional timelines, not constitutional guarantees. So, imagine a student accused of making another student uncomfortable during a discussion. The language in the policy is vague. The notice just summarizes the allegation, but doesn't actually give the full context or any real evidence. The student tries to prepare a response, but the process is already moving forward under these internal rules. Now, the issue here isn't about whether the student is actually right or wrong. The real problem is that the system deciding all this isn't structurally required to give him the same protections you'd get in a proper court. The triad has basically flipped. Instead of having notice, defense, and accountable adjudication, the student is met with accusation, ambiguity, and administrative ratification. The second promise of due process is impartial judgment. In the constitutional system, the roles are separated. One party accuses, another defends, a judge presides. Sometimes, a jury decides the facts. No one takes on all those roles at once. And that separation, it's not just for show, it's a fundamental protection against bias. Now, let's consider how a number of alternative systems operate. The same institution that writes the rules also appoints the investigators, trains the adjudicators, and bears the reputational consequences of the outcome. The decision-maker might actually be part of the same administrative structure as the office bringing the complaint. And appeals, if they exist at all, often remain within the same system. So picture this: a graduate student is accused of research misconduct. The university convenes a panel. The university defines the standards. The university investigates. The university decides. And the university announces the result. At no point does the process exit the institution whose interests are directly implicated. Here, the triad has inverted again. Instead of an impartial tribunal, separated roles, and public legitimacy, the student encounters institutional fusion, mission bias, and self-validation. The outcome, sure, may be correct, but the structure just cannot guarantee that it is. So, the third promise is that claims will be tested. In court, evidence isn't just collected, it's actually challenged. Witnesses are questioned, contradictions are exposed, and credibility is examined in real time. This isn't about aggression, it's about truth-seeking under pressure. In many alternative systems, that pressure is reduced or even removed. Investigators gather statements. Summaries are compiled. Questions might be filtered or limited. And direct confrontation is sometimes discouraged or even outright prohibited. The process turns into one of administrative evaluation, rather than adversarial testing. Consider a professional licensing complaint for a moment. A young engineer is accused of violating ethical guidelines. The investigation relies mostly on interviews and document review. The engineer submits a written response, but has only limited ability to directly challenge the accuser's claims. In the end, the panel reviews the file and reaches a conclusion. There is no moment where competing accounts are forced into direct conflict under structured questioning. The triad has inverted once more. Instead of evidence, confrontation, and disciplined fact-finding, the process becomes allegation, paper review, and administrative credibility assignment. The fourth promise is that decisions will be grounded in law and explained. In the constitutional system, the rule exists before the case. The court applies that rule to the facts and explains its reasoning. That explanation becomes part of the public record, subject to scrutiny and appeal. In alternative systems, the rule is often elastic. Codes of conduct, professional standards, or institutional policies are written broadly. Decisions may cite those standards, but interpret them flexibly. The explanation, if provided, may be brief and insulated from broader review. Imagine a medical student facing disciplinary action for unprofessional behavior. The standard is not a statute passed through Congress, it is an internal code. The decision explains that the student's conduct fell below expectations. But what those expectations precisely require, and how they were applied, remains largely within the institution's discretion. The triad shifts from law, record, and reasoned decision to policy elasticity, closed record, and discretionary conclusion. So, the student is judged, but not under a rule that was publicly fixed and consistently applied in the constitutional sense. The fifth promise is that the process itself is accountable. Court proceedings are, with limited exceptions, public. Decisions can be appealed to higher courts. Errors can be corrected by institutions outside the original decision-maker. The system is not self-contained. Alternative systems are often the opposite. Proceedings may be confidential, appeals may be internal, the standards of review may be limited, the institution closes the loop on its own process. A law student faces a character and fitness inquiry before admission to the bar. The panel conducts its review. The student responds. The decision is issued. Appeals, if available, remain within the bar's own structure. So, the process is legally authorized, but it is not externally accountable in the same way a court proceeding would be. The triad becomes confidentiality, internal appeal, and institutional closure. The system validates itself. What ties all of these examples together is not malice. It is structure. These systems are often built by well-intentioned people trying to address real problems, but they are built outside the constitutional framework that makes fairness durable. And that is precisely the problem. The constitutional system assumes that power must be constrained because it will be used. Alternative systems, on the other hand, assume that power can be trusted because it's exercised by the right people, for the right reasons. But that assumption is not stable. It just can't be. Any authority that exists without hard limits will expand to fill its space. For students and professionals, this is not theoretical. It actually shapes reputations, careers, and lives. A finding in a university process can be used to justify dismissal. It can be referred to university police for enforcement as if it were a true judicial result. It can be used by other colleges and graduate schools to deny applications. A professional disciplinary action can impact licensure. It can be used to justify employment decisions. It can be reported publicly in a way that implies criminal responsibility and undermines the individual's relationships in countless ways. These are not minor consequences. They are deprivations of opportunity imposed through systems that inherently deny constitutional protections. Then, students conditioned by these unconstitutional methods enter the workforce with not just limited conceptions of their own rights, but the rights others should be entitled to. They replicate the deficiencies in their workplaces, their personal lives, and eventually in our government itself. The solution is not to ask these systems to adopt better norms, more training, or improved sensitivity. Those are just refinements. They don't change the underlying structure. The only durable solution is to restore the principle that meaningful deprivations of status, opportunity, or reputation must be governed by processes subject to constitutional due process, actual courts with clear rules, separated roles, adversarial testing, reasoned decisions, and external review. Anything less is not a different form of fairness. It's a different category of power, one that Article 3 of the Constitution reserved to the government itself, only to be exercised through legitimate courts. And once you have seen that distinction, once you have experienced it directly, it becomes impossible to unsee.